Putin and Russia just delivered big for Venezuela as they delivered air defense missiles and even floated the idea of sending more equipment like hypersonic missiles in defense of Venezuela against United States aggression. I love how Nicolas Maduro asked Russia and Vladimir Putin for help, and Putin and his team was like, don't worry bro, we got you. This is devastating for the West because the narrative was that Russia was falling apart and they can no longer maintain their military-industrial complex after being weakened by Ukraine. But apparently Russia is doing so well, they have enough left over to offer to Venezuela in order to thwart the imperialist ambitions of the United States. This is also the same offer that Putin and Russia made to Iran while it was under siege by the Zionist entity. It's just Iran turned down the offer for help. Vladimir Putin has become a leading central figure when it comes to fighting against U.S. imperialism in the genocidal West. So Venezuela will be protected by Russian air defenses. Also, Nicolas Maduro is arming militias all over Venezuela who is ready to defend their homeland against United States aggression. This is going to be a complete disaster for the United States. We're looking at another Iraq happening in real time. Also, isn't it interesting that if Nicolas Maduro was so unpopular like the West claimed, why would he arm his proletariat, the same proletariat that will be able to overthrow him? The reality of the situation is Nicolas Maduro has the support of the Venezuelan people and the global majority against the United States war machine. Evangelical Christians are in a full-blown civil war as Israel continues to tear apart the Republican Party. Kevin Roberts from the Heritage Foundation walked back his promise about having right-wing debates about Israel after he was threatened by Zionist billionaires. The American people are beginning to wake up to the crimes of Israel and their parasitic relationship to our ruling class. And that includes members of the American First Coalition who realize that Donald Trump isn't actually America first. The rise of Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson turning against Israel scared the shit out of the Zionists in the Republican Party. After they was utterly destroyed in the battle of ideas, now the Zionist-controlled ruling class is relying on censorship and blacklisting people who are critical of the state of Israel and their genocidal policies. Now these Zionist billionaires are buying TikTok, they are forcing YouTube to erase evidence of Israeli war crimes, and they are shifting algorithms to show Zionist propaganda while banning dissent. Could it be more clear that we are occupied? We need an anti-Zionist movement to reclaim our sovereignty from these Zionist war criminals.
Hey, what's poppin', my friends, my family? We got a banger for you tonight. Welcome to Nigga Primetime. We have our great friend Kshama Sawant who will be joining us. And this is a great opportunity, especially with Kshama running against a genocidal Democrat, taking the anti-Zionist position outside of the duopoly. Because it's interesting to see the support among for Israel completely collapse among everyone on the political spectrum, from the left to the right. Even centrist liberal Democrats are starting to turn on the state of Israel. I don't know if you guys seen like these town halls. Like, these Republicans are being buried alive by their own constituents. There was like Ted Cruz and a few other Republicans who went to like TPUSA to explain why we got to put Israel first, to advance the interests of America first. These people they're being ate alive, my friends, trying to explain their support for the state of Israel. And I know you guys seen it, the algorithm's been completely cooked. And I'm about to bring Kshama in on this thought, but if you see these Israeli bots, if you see these influencers that are paid $7,000 to post pro-Israeli content, you guys realize that's all they have now, right? The tide has shifted so much so that New York was willing to vote for a Muslim because he said he supports Palestinian rights. That's how much people are sick of this Zionist influence. And that was my take yesterday. That's why I said when you look at these elections, it was a referendum on Zionism, even when Mamdani didn't want it to be. Mamdani didn't want it to be a referendum on Zionism. He didn't even want to talk about it. They kept bringing it up. But I want to get Kshama in this because I can't wait to get Shama's take on this. Because there's still no ceasefire, by the way. You have Israel that's still going on an absolute rampage. You have Donald Trump that is supporting Israeli terrorist attacks in the West Bank. So I've been warning my friends and my comrades, absolutely do not use this moment, some random mayorship, as a tranquilizing drug, which I unfortunately seen a lot of people fall for that trick. But let me shut up. Let me get our guests in. Candid, running as an independent against Adam Smith, founder of Worker Strike Back. Thank you for joining us. Kshama Sawant on RBN once again. Thank you, my friend. It's always great to see you.
Always great to see you. Thank you for having me, Nick.
Yeah, there was big elections this week, and I want to get your thoughts on what the position the left should take from here. And I shared this before, and I told you this, like, this was your statement on October 7th. I love the statement that you put out. There was no condemning globalizing the intifada here. You have a true independent anti-Zionist campaign against Adam Smith, and I really hope that we can see the same energy around your candidacy that we saw around Zohran Mamdani, because the person you're running against is straight up awful. But the Zionist meltdown, and I want your thoughts on the state of your campaign and how the left should interpret the win by Zohran Mamdani. But look at this. This is funny because this is from Matt Taibbi. Buckle up, America. The Zohran era is here. The mainstream Republicans died 9 years ago. The Democratic Party funeral started last night. So there's like these massive freak out among the capitalist guys. They're like, hey, bro, Matt Taibbi, this guy, he's advocating for welfare capitalism. Like, why are you guys fear-mongering over a liberal Zionist who advocating for welfare capitalism? But Kshama, what are your thoughts, and what do you think the left should be doing following, I think, what you can call a massive defeat by the Zionist regime propaganda machine for sure? What's your thoughts, Kshama? Thank you for joining me once again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Nick. And the way you pose your question is exactly the way we should pose it, which is what should we make of this, in the sense that on the one hand, Mamdani's election it shows, and in general, the elections, 2025 elections across the board, what they show, what's the common denominator, the main feature? The main feature is it was by the working class of the United States. It was a repudiation of Zionism and of Wall Street interests and of the politicians who represent Zionism and Wall Street interests. So that was, if I was to answer in one sentence what the 2025 elections represented, that's what they represented. And in fact, it shows you that ordinary people, millions of people across the nation, are angry. They want to fight back, and they're grasping at whatever is available for them. And so, so if there is an election campaign of, for example, like Zohran Mamdani, that represents any type of fight back then against the ruling class, then working class people are seizing on that. So it shows you what the message that we should take on the left is, an extremely heartening message, which is that working class people are ready for a fight back. And the obstacle here is not mass consciousness and its willingness to fight, but the obstacle is the leadership that's on offer. And so that's where we have to be sober about what Mamdani's victory represents, because on the one hand, it's quite a slam dunk, in the sense that if you run a campaign on working class demands and you hammer on those demands relentlessly, on extremely popular policy demands, and you hammer on them relentlessly, then you can win. So if Mamdani's election shows anything, that's what it shows. And it's important to contrast Mamdani's election to the fact that, for example, Omar Fateh, who was for a time being called the Mamdani of Minneapolis or Mamdani of the Middle East, he didn't actually win. And in fact, even though he didn't win, even though he was running against Jacob Fry, who's a very unpopular mayor, a mayor who was already served for 2 terms, a mayor who had really dinged his reputation big time during the George Floyd rebellion, by calling the National Guard. I mean, really, this guy is a piece of work. And yet that guy was able to defeat Omar Fateh. Why? Because Omar Fateh didn't actually run a campaign like Mamdani, where Mamdani was relentlessly hammering on the demands. And so I think that is one of the main messages that we should take out of this. But obviously, outside of that, it's not. I don't agree with the kind of equating of the election victory with a victory for the working class that the DSA has been doing, where if you win the election, that's the end of it. Because for us, the way we have run our elections on the Seattle City Council, I don't know if all your viewers know this, but I was on the Seattle City Council for 10 years. We won 4 elections, but on a revolutionary basis, meaning being clear at all times that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both parties of the capitalist class, and that our role as an elected office is to disrupt politics as usual, not to run a little bit to the left of the what are called the progressive Democrats. And so on that basis, we were able to win the nation's highest minimum wage, the Amazon tax, and unprecedented renters' rights. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that for this victory, election victory, to translate into a tangible material victory for the working class, it will require the DSA leaders like Mamdani to build the kind of movements that we built, movements that are not only independent of the Democratic and Republican parties, but movements that are in clear defiance to the Democratic and Republican parties. Those are the kinds of leaders and movements that you need. But I don't think that it's very likely that Mamdani and the DSA leaders are going to do. And it's not because sometimes people who are excited will think, well, why can't you just let us have our moment? Obviously, we want every possible victory for the working class. But as revolutionary socialists, our job also is to warn about what we know are actually things that we should be worried about. And one of those is exactly that we don't think that there is that kind of leadership that's needed to actually win the victories that working people need in New York.
Yeah, this is not my first rodeo. This is not my first rodeo. You guys know the mayor of Kansas City, Quentin Lucas, who betrayed Casey Tennis, who is organizing a rent strike. Like, these are the things that we should be doing right now: organizing rent strikes, organizing the proletariat, and engaging in class war, not substituting that with bourgeoisie electoral politics and making backroom deals with the capitalist class and the landlord class. So Casey Tennis actually supported Quentin Lucas when he originally ran for mayor, and they have since condemned him because it's just another example. Like, this is not the first time we've seen this. What are the mechanisms of accountability do we have here? Like, I know a lot of people are treating this like a game. I know this is a feel-good moment. I know it's funny to watch the Zionist meltdown. I've been enjoying it too. It would be a giant own goal. It would be political malpractice if we did not mock the Zionists and the billionaire class melting down right now. But it will also be malpractice, and I will be failing my role to you guys if I wasn't clear-eyed about the obstacles we have to overcome, about the red flags I see around Mamdani. So, Kshama, I think we all know the answer to this question. Do you organize with the working class, or do you organize by making backroom deals with the capitalist class, hoping that you can negotiate wins with the workers by making concessions? We have already seen which strategy Mamdani is going to advocate for. The same people who was on the campaign trail, the people who were supporting him, was locked out of his victory party. He's already shown his hand. He's like, thanks for the victory, guys. Good luck. Look, Mamdani says he will meet with Jamie Dimon, other financial tie-ins in New York City. And Kshama, there was a lot of people upset with me because you know what I did? I exposed the fact that he had took campaign donations from people like Elizabeth Simmons, hardcore Zionists like Elizabeth Simmons. And you guys wonder why he conceded on stuff like allowing the Zionists to lead the NYPD, why he condemns globalized the Intifada, why he is organizing and having photo ops with Richie Torres, and someone who donates. The Working Family Party, we warned you on RBN. It's one of the reasons why I'm blacklisted by the gatekeeper class. We talk about Kshama. The gatekeeper class don't want anything to do with us because I expose how the Working Family Party take donations from George and Alex Soros. And they was supportive in donating Zohran Mamdani. So when this photo dropped, everyone on the internet like, what? I was like, I said this months ago. So what is the strategy? If it was a strategy, if he was reaching out to you, have you reached out to you, Kshama? Have you reached? He didn't reach out to RBN. If he ain't reached out with any mutual aid organization, what is your strategy? Are you reaching out to Kshama, or are you reaching out to Alex Soros? Are you reaching out to Jamie Dimon? So I'm not trying to be negative, fam. I'm telling you guys, all the red flags are right here. But Kshama, I'll pass to you. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is where I think what you're saying is where most of the confusion lies, where I think a lot of well-meaning people want to believe that somehow there is a path to winning substantial victories for the working class without actually taking on pitch battle, class struggle, class-based battle against
Yes.
the billionaire class, against the bourgeois. That is the problem. People want to believe that there might be a shortcut, there might be an easier way to do this, but there isn't. That's the problem. The only way to win anything substantial for the working class is to go into battle against the billionaires, which means, and
Exactly.
that is not just generic terminology. It is actually having leadership that understands that the Jamie Dimons and the whoever, the Tish family, the billionaire families, these are not on the side of the working class. And the reason, and I'll talk about some of the specifics of what Mamdani has done as well, but just before that, just to say that the reason this happens, the reason over and over again you get leadership, it's not only in elected officials in Congress or city halls, but also labor leadership that's elected inside the labor unions, and non-elected leadership, for example, in social movements like Black Lives Matter. Why it happens that over and over again you get leaders who emerge out of some sort of maybe the beginnings of some sort of radical idea, but then they end up capitulating to trying to make backroom deals with the bosses and their parties. The reason that happens is because if you are a leader and you are not going to be willing, which you shouldn't, but if you're not, like myself, if you're not going to be willing to make backroom deals with the bosses, and you are actually clear that you need to build fighting movements in defiance of all of these people who are trying to woo you, then they will make your life hell, because they understand that as a leader who is not willing to sell out 1 inch, they need to take you down in order to subjugate the movement of the working class people. And it's the movement that they're really afraid of. That's the reason also behind the assassination of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, all of these leaders who were slain. I mean, what they feared was the kind of mobilization that they were capable of rallying millions of people around a unified working class message across racial and other divisions. That is what the ruling class fears. And so if you don't have leadership that is clear about that, then that is a fundamental problem. So I just want to give you a contrast. I mean, so when I was on the city council, we won renters' rights like nobody's business. I mean, we just kept on winning renters' rights. We won a 6-month notice for all rent increases, a $10 cap on late rent fee. We won a law that says there's a moratorium, ban on evictions during winter months, a ban on evictions of families with school children and public school workers during the school year. We had something called the Carl Hagelin law, which was named after a really exploitative landlord. And that law says that no landlord can increase rents in housing that has substandard quality, where there are outstanding housing code violations. We passed a law which says that all tenants who are forced to move because of a rent increase of 10% or more, their landlord owes them 3 months worth of rent, because that's a type of economic eviction. And we won full funding for eviction court defense for tenants who are facing eviction, because that's a make or break whether the landlord wins the case or the tenant wins the case. And so we kept on winning. And you know what the main lobbyist of corporate landlords at that time said? After he retired, he said publicly that the landlord lobby was unable to win at all. While I was in City Hall, they were not able to win. They were simply not able to win. And he credited that. I mean, he was angry, obviously, but he credited that with what he called, this is a quote, Sawant's army. So he understood that the reason all these Democrats, he said they would say all the right things to the corporate lobbyists in their private offices, but the once they came to the city, chambers and sat on the dais in City Hall, then everything crumbled and it went the way of working class people. Why? Because I used my elected position to build a fighting movement. And what does that mean? It means bringing thousands of people into City Hall, into marches and protests across the city, but very clearly calling out the Democrats. A fighting movement means you don't go to City Hall and say, Democrats, can you please do the right thing and say vote yes on Kshama Sawant's legislation? No, what you say is that you, whatever your name is, XYZ council member, you pretend to be progressive, but you're getting ready to vote no on this. We see that you are a progressive in name only, and you need to be thrown out. If you vote no on this, you need to be thrown out, and we will expose you. And that, that type of defiance, that type of where you reject respectability politics and you make it very clear that no politician who is going to vote against the interests of the working class gets to keep any kind of quote unquote progressive reputation, that you tear it to shreds. That is the sign of a fighting movement. Contrast this with what Mamdani has done. He has not even taken office yet. He was asked by the New York Times. There was an article that said 10 questions with Zohran Mamdani. And one of the questions was, what is one issue in politics that you've changed your mind about? And I don't believe that it's one issue that he's changed his mind about, but this was the answer he gave: the role of private market in housing construction. What he meant was that, I was too harsh about private housing construction. I think along with the rent freeze, we also need, and I think since then he has promised some sort of deregulation to the real estate industry. And then just to give you another example, he sought out, after the primary victory, when he was soaring high, that was the moment he chose to make a compromise with the landlord lobby and with the real estate industry. When you're soaring high in the election season, what should you be doing? What I would have done is, there was a rent increase that was carried out right after his primary victory by the Rent Control Board in New York. I would have organized my 50,000 volunteers and held a mass rally outside the Rent Control Board's meeting, and I would have shut it down when they were deciding to increase the rent. Instead of doing that, he didn't do anything. I don't believe he even spoke about that rent increase, which is very bizarre because one of his main demands is a rent freeze. So he didn't go and do actually what he says he's going to do after he's going to be mayor. What are you waiting for? Then do it right now. But anyway, what he instead did was he sought out Catherine Wild, who is, she's a spokesperson for the Wall Street guys. I mean, she's the spokesperson for the richest of the rich. He asked her, give me a list of every major rich person that you think I should call. And then he started reaching out to them one by one. One of them was Larry Fink. He's the CEO of BlackRock. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager with $13.5 trillion in assets as of this year. He also reached out to Hamilton James, the former head of Blackstone, which is also the world's largest private equity firm. I mean, Blackstone made a killing with the help of Obama after the home foreclosure crisis coming out of the Great Recession. So I just don't believe, I don't know what he talked with those people, but I can promise you that doesn't bode well.
And this is exactly why I endorse Kshama, and I gave a speech in support of you. Can you imagine these tactics on a national level, my friends? Can you imagine us mobilizing the RBN audience on a national level, having a member of Congress that is one of us that's engaging in these tactics, mobilizing the working class instead of doing these backroom deals. And this is the kind of stuff that made me very suspicious very early on. Very early on, I'm like, okay, it's a sign that he's not engaging in class warfare with us. This is a substitution. The professional managerial class, the gatekeepers, they want to substitute class war with bourgeoisie electoral politics and this false idea. And it's an idea that they implant to the working class because out of self-serving interest, where they say, "Oh well, the key to get to gain victories as a working class is to rub shoulders and rub elbows with the elite class, and then just beg for crumbs, and they will happily give it to you." That's ahistorical. It's something that they sell to you because it's great for their career. It's a great way for them to get MSNBC contracts. If they do that, then they will come out and condemn third parties like Hassan Piker and Sam Cedar did. But when I saw stuff like this, when I saw Zionist billionaires donating to the campaign, when I saw him making these deals to landlords, I was like, man, that is not a good sign. And if you are supportive of Mamdani, if you're part of the New York working class, who I understand, who is desperate to lower the cost of goods, maybe if you're someone who had Andrew Cuomo derangement syndrome, which I don't think he's a horrible guy. I get it. But it's upon you to understand what you're really up against. And I would not be doing my due diligence if I wasn't warning you guys about these gigantic red flags. I saw this earlier. And I think this is they threw you in there. They try to compare you to Mamdani, which I would not make that comparison. Look, meet the socialists following Mamdani's lead. Like, isn't that Kshama? Am I tripping? They got Kshama here in the left corner. This is from the Free Press. They're a right-wing website, so I wouldn't compare you guys to. But you see where they're going, Kshama. You have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for the right wing, obviously, they recognize, I think the right wing is very, very aware, and Trump, his allies are very, very aware of who we are. They understand that we're revolutionary socialists, but it helps their narrative to portray all of these other people also as communists, but when they are not actually. In fact, Mamdani denies it. He asks, "Are you a communist?" He denies it. I think one time he was asked, "Are you a Marxist?" And he says, "No, I'm a democratic socialist." And so as far as that goes, he's being honest. But it's very much a contrast from what the kind of politics we represent, myself and my fellow members of Revolutionary Workers, and also the broader organizations that we have launched, Workers Strike Back. It's a very far cry from what we represent. I mean, just to give you a contrast, my inauguration speech in 2014, January 2014, when I first took office as a city council member, laid out a clear analysis of capitalism as a system being our enemy, and that all the parties of capitalism hence also being our class enemies, and that our role in City Hall was to completely turn politics upside down, which is precisely what we did. I mean, the Seattle Times, which is no fan of mine, had to admit openly, I mean, they're a paper for the Chamber of Commerce, and they had to admit that we commandeered the city's entire political agenda and made it work for the working class. I think that's the kind of approach that we need. And in fact, as you know, Nick, I've pledged that if we are elected to the US Congress, that I will turn my congressional inauguration into a mass rally of 10,000 people and use it as a platform to immediately launch a national campaign for ending all US military aid to Israel, and also for free healthcare for all, funded by taxing the rich. I mean, we have pledged that we will immediately launch those two campaigns on a national scale. That is the correct use of a congressional office. If I might, Nick, just to compare this to, I mean, this is not just about Mamdani, right? Mamdani represents the kind of politics that AOC and DSA leaders and Bernie Sanders, they've represented for many years, and it has failed. I mean, so the question is, how many times on the merry-go-round are we going to go? And also, it would be, as you said, it would be completely unprincipled of us if we didn't point out the fallacies of this kind of strategy, where they think that you can make peace with the political establishment and win anything for the working class. I mean, just to remind people, When AOC first ran for Congress in 2018, she said, this is a quote of her. She said, don't people realize that the most powerful position you can be in is when you are not materially attached to a position of power? If you're a one-term Congress member, so what? You can make 10 years worth of change in one term if you are not afraid. That was AOC before she won her first election. And unfortunately, since then, what has she done? I mean, she occupied Nancy Pelosi's office with the Sunrise Movement one time after she won her election. But then, since then, it has been a complete backslide, a complete capitulation to the politics of the Democratic Party, and hence the politics of capitalism. She voted to break the railroad workers' strike. She has refused to do the kind of fight back that you would need against a genocide. I mean, she lied on the DNC stage last year, calling Kamala Harris saying that Harris was tirelessly fighting for a ceasefire, which was a bald-faced lie. She also refused to support an amendment that would have cut at least $500 million from Israel funding for weapons like Iron Dome, and she said it was defensive weapons. But come on, this is a genocide machinery. There is absolutely not an iota of it that's defensive. It is all completely bloody. It's a machine of slaughter of the Palestinian people, and if you don't take a clear stand on it, then you are helping that machinery of genocide. So in other words, that was a pro-genocide vote. So this is what we're seeing from the so-called DSA left. And the DSA has 250 elected officials across the nation. In fact, in this 25 election, they apparently won 12 more positions. But my question is, what are they doing with all those positions? I mean, how does the working class gain from just the DSA accumulating elected positions where every single elected official is afraid to rock the boat and is building their own careers? And contrast all those hundreds of positions plus AOC, Bernie Sanders, all these prominent, world-renowned people, compare all of that put together to our one position on the city council, and we completely changed the agenda. I mean, just to give you a sense, not only did we won the first major city $15 minimum wage with inflation, which makes the wage in Seattle now the highest minimum wage in the nation. In January, it is going to go up to $21.30. But it's not only that. Because we won 15 here, and the way we won it, by building a defiant movement that electrified a nation, we were able to inspire working class people to win 15 plus dollars an hour in many other cities and states. And so by now, because of the one victory we won here, tens of millions of workers have got massive wage increases across the nation. That is how you win for the working class. But you don't win that by making backroom deals or wanting peaceful and cozy relations with the Kathy Hochul's and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers of this world. No, you win that by declaring war on them. And to be accurate, you're declaring war back on them. Because what is capitalism's steady state? Capitalism's steady state is class war on the working class. That's not peace. That's class war against the working class. So when you fight against the representatives of capitalism, you do it as a badge of honor because it is war back on them. We didn't pick this fight. This fight was handed to us. And so our choices are either laying down and dying and allowing working class people to suffer, or to actually fighting back and changing something.
That's very well said, Kshama. If you're on the RBN side, I'm going to end the RBN YouTube stream, but we're still live on Rumble, Twitch, X, and on my personal YouTube channel. But the potential for the strategy you lay out is endless, and it exposes the gatekeeper left, the professional managerial left, for how ineffective they actually has been. And this is what I've been nailing them. I said it during my speech. I said it during my last live stream with Haas, where Sam Cedar was smugly telling people what they should do, even though he accomplished nothing for the working class. You guys seen the victories that Kshama won in Seattle. We are advocating for class warfare. They're advocating building coalitions with CIA operatives like Abigail the Virginia governor, the CIA agent, Abigail Span.
Can I just
go
say?
Ahead, Kshama.
Yeah, Abigail Spanberger is not only a former CIA agent. she also voted for funding of the genocide alongside Adam Smith, my opponent. So this person is absolutely, should be radioactive. And yet, what did we see? We saw AOC send
Yeah.
out a mass email to working class people saying you should support Abigail Spanberger. That's what AOC is. I mean, so that's another. I mean, the question you have to ask is where's the line you will draw beyond which you will not sink? Like if genocide is not that line, if Holocaust is not that line, then there is no line as far as AOC is concerned. So what are other chances that we are supposed to give to these elected officials who sell us out this badly?
Look at this. This is they have the red brown alliance without even the red part. Like they're not even red. They're just a straight up alliance with fascists. AOC was fundraising for the CIA operative. And these are the coalitions that they're willing to build, but they will never be seen in a million years with Kshama Sawant. Remember, AOC said that Jill Stein was parasitic. So Jill Stein, an anti-Zionist Jew who was arrested, brutally arrested, protesting the genocide in Gaza, she's parasitic, but a pro-genocide CIA agent is worth fundraising for. You guys see how these are not small disagreements? How is this a small? They're like, oh, you guys got small disagreements. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a small disagreement. It is a completely fundamental different way we view reality in the world itself. They're willing to sell out and make a devil's bargain that we will become friendly with the CIA. We will support imperialism against Cuba. We will support imperialism against Venezuela because maybe the capitalist class will give us crumbs. You guys realize I view that ideology as reprehensible. It is not close to my ideology. It is nowhere. The devil's bargain social democrat ideology of selling out the global south, selling out the working class for crumbs. Don't say that's close to me. It's not. It's nowhere near my worldview. If you are willing to work with Abigail Spanberger, whatever the fuck her name is, you have a completely different moral character than me. You was raised completely differently than me. And we know that because AOC completely lied about her biography. Like, you guys are willing to organize with this party? I know you guys are gonna roast me for that, but I don't care about her goddamn name. But look, the United States gathered intelligence last year that Israel's military lawyers warned there was evidence that could support war crime charges against Israel for its military campaign in Gaza. Hey fam, they all knew. You want to know what else I covered, which many mainstream media outlets refused to? Do you guys remember how there was a Biden official who resigned from the administration? And no one in corporate media covered why they did, because they put a report together, Kshama, listing all the war crimes that Israel was carrying out, and it was making a recommendation that we end support for Israel because of the war crimes. You guys want to know what Biden and Blinken did? They told him to leave. They told him to resign for exposing Israeli war crimes. So it's not like oops, we accidentally funded genocide. Fam, they was there every step of the way. And one of the biggest lies that they tell people is that Bernie Sanders and AOC is against offensive weapons to Israel. You guys realize that Bernie Sanders view defensive weapons as the missiles that Israel used to bomb Lebanon, right? Because the liberal Zionist position is that Israel has the right to defend themselves against quote-unquote terrorist groups, which include Hezbollah in Lebanon. So when Bernie Sanders and the progressives tell you that they support these arms embargo, that is not true, which is evidenced by Bernie Sanders supporting the Lindsey Graham Senate resolution where he supported Israel's inherent right to defend itself, aka bomb their neighbors. There's a mass confusion on the United States left on this issue, and I think it's done on purpose in order to get people to still support the genocidal party. And I want to get to some more Israel-Palestine issue because I want to, for our next segment, Sean, I want to highlight how the ceasefire is not real. Like Israel is blocking over 1/3 of aid that's supposed to go to Gaza. But before I go to that, Kshama, do you have any other thoughts to wrap up our segment on regarding the elections? I want to give you the last thoughts on the topic before I shift, because we're going to shift to Gaza next. But any final topics on Zohran, the Democratic complicity on Gaza? Anywhere you want to take, any final thoughts you have before I move on to my next
Yeah,
segment?
I do have one thought which might be useful, and also I think it relates to the next topic, next segment also that you want to talk about, because it's, ultimately it's about the Democratic Party and how that's where a lot of the confusion lies, the role of the Democratic Party. And so just to say that, people like Mamdani and a lot of people in DSA who refuse to break from the Democratic Party, we obviously have always run as independent socialists, and Workers Strike Back is as an organization, every single member of Workers Strike Back has voted on a program that includes building the project of building a new working class party. And in contrast to us, Mamdani and a lot of the leaders of the DSA, they, in Mamdani's words, are fighting for what they say the soul of the Democratic Party. And of course, I have publicly said that that's terrible, because the Democratic Party is soulless and it's now a party of genocide, which obviously is our next segment. But just to say that even now, even after Mamdani's blowout victory on the basis of working class demands, whatever, we have our criticisms of what approach he and DSA leaders are taking, but the point is that they ran a kind of campaign that is almost blasphemous for the Democratic Party. And then a lot of people are asking, will the Democratic Party, will the big wigs of the Democratic Party, will they take this on? Will they say that, understand that this actually works and they can run populist, left populist elections and win victories? Well, what do you think the Democratic Party strategists and the main power brokers in the Democratic Party are doing? They are doing the exact opposite. Even now, even after Mamdani's internationally known victory, what they are doing is setting it up as a debate between, well, should we run as progressive populists or like Mamdani, or should we run like centrist pragmatists like Spanberger? And of course, their decision, where it lies. It's in the latter. And then you literally have Ezra Klein writing an article in the New York Times, a long, you know what I'm talking about, right? This column on the 2nd. So this was just before the election results were announced, in which he says, this is the way you beat Trump and Trumpism. So what is Ezra Klein's prescription for the fact that the Democratic Party is completely destroyed in approval ratings? Oh, you're not right-wing enough. Run candidates who are against abortion rights in the red states. That's your answer. See, this exposes the completely rotten nature of the Democratic Party, and this idea, this project of trying to rescue the Democratic Party and put it on life support and supposedly winning something for the working class. That project is a fool's errand. We have to build movements independent and much more than that. Actually, our movement's project instead of putting the Democratic Party on life support has to be to destroy the Democratic and Republican parties.
Very, very well said, Kshama. For the last 15-20 minutes for our last segment, I want to keep this Friday stream to around an hour. It's always great to get your takes on these things, Kshama. I've been speaking to a lot of my friends. We've been having a lot of these conversations about what next for the working class. And I always put it upon myself now. I think always side on personal responsibility. I think it's upon us to show the working class a new direction. And that's the mindset I have moving forward. For the people in New York, they didn't see any other option. I know there are a lot of people in New York who was desperate because the capitalist class is making their lives harder aggressively. And they view Mamdani as like almost like a defense for capitalism, like something that will ease the pain. And I understand that, but it's upon us moving forward to make it clear and educate our brothers and sisters what the proper path. The proper path is class warfare, and it has to be outside of an organization that isn't infested by Zionism. Because I talked to many of my friends. I talked to Nardine. I talked to many others. Yes, Zionists are melting down, but Zohran Mamdani had to win by condemning the resistance. He had to condemn, globalize the Intifada. He had to condemn. So that actually put a target on real activists who advocated against struggle against the Zionist empire. It's undercutting the interests of our Palestinian brothers and sisters by condemning their struggle against the Zionist state. So yes, he won, but he delegitimized the struggles of our brothers and sisters. It's something that they've been very concerned about ever since he's spoken out against resistance, legitimizing the state of Israel. Because as everyone in New York is celebrating, they having their bourgeoisie late night after party clubs, the ceasefire is still going on. The ceasefire has failed to stop the violence in Gaza. Israel is still starving the people in Gaza. Ben Gvir had made it clear. He gave public speeches. He was like, guys, this ceasefire is not real. We just wanted to get our hostages back. You guys think we was gonna stop and we was gonna pull away from Gaza? If you guys thought that was ever on the table, you guys was out of your damn mind. This is what Ben Gvir is openly saying. So I'm gonna show you guys a few headlines. I'm gonna get your thoughts, Kshama, because as the professional managerial class, as the Zohran Mamdani left, is just busy dancing in the streets of New York, nothing had changed. Absolutely nothing had changed. Not only are you're not closer to Medicare for all, you're not closer to increased minimum wage, you still have the Palestinian people that are being slaughtered. For the people who only listening, the headline I have here: Gaza receives less than 1/3 of humanitarian aid promised by Israel. Where is Zohran Mamdani on this? Instead, he spent his time legitimizing the anti-Semitism hoax and explaining how he's going to use the NYPD to crack down on anti-Semitism. That's what his intention is right now. Instead of highlighting this stuff, at least Rashid Tlaib says something. There is no ceasefire. It is a lie. More than 200 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli government since Trump claimed a ceasefire was achieved. And I showed you guys how CNN, Dana Bash, all these people was going along. The people who consider themselves Trump enemies, Kshama, they were spreading Trump's lie. They were like, you got to give Trump credit for his Gaza peace plan. They were saying that as Israel was slaughtering Palestinians, like people like Fareed Zakaria, the people who jokes of a journalist, they're pure propagandists, giving Trump victories where he never deserved it. Not only did he not deserve any credit for peace in Gaza, he's straight up enabling terrorist attacks in the West Bank. Israeli settlers' attacks in West Bank reached record numbers in October, UN says. And Donald Trump, he came out and his administration said clear that we're not going to sanction Israeli settlers attacking people in the West Bank. So when he said that publicly, that was permission. So what happens, Kshama, when the president of the United States is like, I know Biden floated the idea of putting sanctions and they didn't do it. And then Trump was actually like, no, we're not going to put any sanctions on settlers in the West Bank. They hear you when you say that. So the Israeli terrorists immediately escalated their assault. They are reaching record numbers of attacks in the West Bank as you are partying in New York, as you're celebrating Zohran's victory. Israel is annexing the West Bank. They voted to annex the West Bank. You had the Israeli army strike the West Bank 2,350 times last month. Kshama? But
yeah.
Go ahead. Go for it.
No, I was just going to say that, first of all, on your earlier point about to whatever extent the ceasefire, I mean, we all, you and I, and we were predicting that the ceasefire is not actually going to last, and immediately we saw that happening. And I agree with you. It was important that Rashid Tlaib at least said that openly, that that Israel is still killing people in Gaza. But even before I come to that point, to the extent that the ceasefire was going to prevent the deaths, what I said in my rally speech, that Nick, you and I were both there. You were there. Thanks for coming and speaking at our
It was great. It was great.
campaign rally in Seattle in October. Yeah, that was fantastic. And you'll remember, Nick, what I said in my speech was that every death that can be prevented needs to be prevented, and every loss of limb or injury that can be prevented needs to be prevented. But the credit to that uh, does not go to Trump. It goes to the international anti-war movement. It goes to the
Absolutely.
workers in Italy, the general strike in Italy. That's where the credit belongs. First of all, it is completely dishonest to say that any credit belongs with Trump. I mean, he felt the pressures, and that's why he went to, and in fact, he felt the pressure from his own MAGA base, that is a section of his MAGA base that is anti-Israel and pro-Palestine and anti-genocide. And so which also shows that the consciousness of working class people can shift. It can shift in a good way if there is actual direction pointed to provided to it. But as far as what's actually happening, yeah, it's completely bloody. In fact, right now, as many organizations are saying, Gaza is the world's largest mass grave, with 10,000 Palestinians estimated that remain buried under the rubble. The kind of infrastructure that will be needed to even begin rebuilding there, the kind of food and medical assistance and housing and water and electricity that's needed, nothing of that sort is still reaching Gaza. In fact, I saw a new report, I think, on Democracy Now, where they said that only a fraction of the 8 trucks that were supposedly, under the ceasefire agreement that the Israeli state was supposed to allow into Gaza, they're allowing only a fraction of that. So it is still absolutely brutal. And in for all practical purposes, the genocide is still going on. And we saw this report from this journalist. I'm sure you saw this, Nick, from Jasper Nathaniel, who was himself, he had to himself run for his life because the settlers in the West Bank are so violent. They were
Yeah.
also coming after him. I mean, Nathaniel is a US born a US citizen, and he's a journalist, and yet he didn't feel like he had any protection there. You can imagine the kind of brutality and inhumanity and savagery with which these Jewish settlers, right-wing settlers, are attacking ordinary Palestinian people. There was this iconic photo that Jasper Nathaniel took of an older woman who was picking olives from her own grove, and she was being beaten. She was being clubbed by this settler. That's the kind of utter inhumanity that is unfolding there in the West Bank. That is also part of this story. And I think just to, if you don't mind, Nick, I wanted to present this in light of what's needed to be done. Like, what is actually going to stop all this? None of this is going to stop unless we understand that the Israeli state, I mean, obviously there's a Zionist ideology, but that is not at the root of it. At the root of it is the material interests of US imperialism, of the capitalist class, not only in the United States, but also in Western Europe, but also the wealthy classes in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Morocco. So, in other words, this is a question of class alliances, that the Israeli state plays the role of a garrison state. It's an outpost for capitalist interests in a region that is both materially important because of the oil reserves, but also it's a geopolitically crucial region because of the Suez Canal and so on. And so the Israeli occupation, the brutal occupation, and the apartheid state that they have against the Palestinian people, that acts as a huge weaponry against any kind of working class solidarity and working class rebellion in that entire region. And so, in order for anything to change, it has to be a rebellion by working class people in the United States. And the very first step that needs to be taken is actually building a mass movement, a militant mass movement in the United States to end all US military aid to the Israeli state. But that's not going to happen through backroom deals or be doing softly, or like, the moves like AOC, like trying to build some alliance with the Democratic Party and somehow making that happen. No, when you're calling for an end to all US military aid to Israel, which nobody else is, none of these Democrats are doing, not a single Democrat is willing to call for that. Not a single labor leader is calling for that. Rank and file union members are calling for it, yes, but nobody in a leadership position is calling for it other than us. And we are very clear that when you call for an end to all US military aid to Israel, you are taking on battle directly with US imperialism, with Wall Street interests, with BlackRock and Blackstone and Vanguard and all of these absolutely unsavory and criminal and bloody billionaire class that we're taking a battle with. Also, all the tech billionaires, because all of these billionaires and multimillionaires are benefiting from the genocide and from the occupation. And that is why, Nick, you will see the statistics, the kind of you'll see. So obviously there are out and out genociders like my opponent Adam Smith. But if you look at the numbers, it is pretty shocking. The Congressional Progressive Caucus has, I don't know, probably 150 members or something, 95 voting members. During the main bill, which sent, I believe, $26 billion for the genocide, this was House Resolution 8034. There were 95 members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus who were there for voting that day. 53 of those 95 voted to send tens of billions of dollars for the genocide. This is the Congressional Progressive Caucus, for God's sake. And you know
Big
who's a member?
party.
Yeah, exactly. And you know who's by the way, this is another side story, but important one, Nick. You know who's a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus? Adam Smith.
Come
Where
on,
you-
man.
Yes,
Come on, man.
this guy voted for the Iraq war invasion. He
Come
voted
on.
for Afghanistan. He voted for every war that came his way. He voted to create ICE. He voted to cut money from Medicare and Medicaid. He voted to bail out the big banks. This guy is a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. One more thing, if I might. 38 of the 60 House members from the Congressional Black Caucus voted to send tens of billions of dollars for the genocide. I think it is important to call these numbers out because it reveals the true nature of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, don't get me started about the Zionism problem in the Black Congressional Caucus and the Progressive Caucus as a whole. This is the problem when you have these big tent capitalist parties. They all supportive of imperialism. And one thing I want to mention regarding the terrorist attacks we are seeing in the West Bank, we're going to get to Adam Smith earlier because I found an interview where he was talking about military intervention. I saw a quote that was pretty funny where, of course, he supports United States presence, military bases in South America. We'll get to that here very soon. But you guys realize that there's a reason that you're not seeing actual footage of the genocide in Gaza anymore on your feed? It's because they murdered all the journalists in Gaza. We have seen the genocidal West completely wage war on journalism as a concept. As a Zionist in the West, why Israel banned journalists recording what's going on in Gaza? Why won't they allow the UK, like a Western friendly ally, to send BBC journalists in? It's a state approved war on journalism, and that's why many people have been taking a tranquilizing drug, and many people have been focused on Zohran Mamdani and focused on electoralism because they haven't seen these Palestinian bodies on their feet anymore. Kshama, they systematically got rid of all documentation of their crimes in Gaza, which is why we are seeing these insane numbers. You see these insane numbers about, wait, what? They attacked the West Bank 2,350 times? They violated the ceasefire hundreds of times. What? I didn't see that. Yes, they murdered all the journalists. And everyone in the West is complicit with it. The UK is a straight up fascist state. Why is Mamdani critiquing Venezuela and Cuba, but not laying a glove on the UK? Like you guys know they are still prosecuting Richard Medders. They're accusing him of being a terrorist because his position is that of international law. He explained how Palestinians have the right to armed resistance. So they say he's a terrorist supporter, Kshama. So the UK is a fascist state. Journalism is banned there. You guys see what they're enabling in the West? And you want to know who's helping them? You want to know who's the biggest friend of fascism? We're dealing with xyofascism. I think that's more of a nerdy distinction, but it's fascism at the end of the day. Like many of the lame libertarian fence sitter, you know, the people, I know you see them all the time. So I'm like, I don't call myself a socialist, man. I think there's, I'm just. They will never have the critique that the capitalist class side with the fascists. That's how fascism is enabled when capitalists work in coordination. When capitalists and fascists work in coordination to crack down on anti-war movements, on the working class. And you want to know what the big tech bros are doing right now? They are working with the Zionists, and this includes Elon Musk, who is deleting tweets and posts documenting the genocide in Gaza. It's not just YouTube. We've seen it in Instagram. Here's the headline for people who are just listening. YouTube removed hundreds of videos of Israeli human rights violation to comply with Trump's sanctions. Fam, do you realize how insane this is? So Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz waged a war, Kshama, against the International Criminal Court because they put an arrest warrant out against Benjamin Netanyahu. So Trump in the United States with the UK and European allies, they decided to sanction the International Criminal Court. So YouTube is not standing with international law. They're not standing with the anti-genocide activists. They're standing with the fascists in our government. So if you're a Dave Smith type, if you're one of these anti-Zionist libertarians, hey, dipshit, the capitalist class is not on your side. You see how you tackle the issue of Zionism with class war? Dismantling the empire, not asking for a friendlier one simply for you. You got to take on the empire and the capitalist system itself, or they will continue to run interference on behalf of the genocidal capitalist class. But I think I'm belaboring the point here. Kshama, you have any reaction to this? Anything you want to add before I move on? We get near the tail end here. Anything you want to add here?
You just a couple of things. One is that just on your the part that you said, which was really important, Nick, is the literally the journalists that have been targeted in different ways, including killed in Gaza. I mean, it is just shocking. And I'm sure you saw that Chris Hedges, who's been really outspoken about the genocide and the role of the United States in imperialism in general, but also about the way the journalists have been targeted. He was supposed to give the keynote address at the National Press Club of Australia event recently, and he was banned from doing that, as I'm sure you heard, because that is too much truth for the ruling class and its representatives and its peons. Basically, that's what most of what passes for journalism. They're just stenographers for the ruling class, and it always was for a lot of people. But it's just, what's stunning about it is not that it's entirely new, because this is going to be true under capitalism in general. But what's stunning about this is the all-encompassing degree to which this has happened, where, like you're saying, that they're literally wiping out the videos from the documentation, and in fact they're preventing images from going into people's phones, because that's how people were angry about the genocide. And then let's not forget that it's in this context that Elon Musk, we just heard that the Tesla board is giving him $1 trillion pay packet. I mean, This is the crazy world of capitalism. This is the casino of capitalism. That is what we're up against, and we have to build a revolutionary fight back. And I just wanted to one more thing. I think it's a very important point to add in the discussion relating to the genocide as we wrap up the 2025 elections and head to the midterms. And obviously our campaign in our view is the most crucial vehicle that the working class needs to get involved in, because we have a chance at defeating a genocidal billionaire backed Democrat, a 28-year incumbent, and turn Washington, D.C. politics completely upside down in the way that we have turned the politics in Seattle upside down. And we can win a breakthrough victory, and that's what the working class needs right now. We need a breakthrough victory, and this has the potential of being that. But the reason I'm mentioning all this is that why our campaign and our position as an independent socialist is so crucial is that we are the only ones. Our campaign is the only one heading into the midterms that is calling for and fighting for an end to all US military aid to the Israeli state. And the reason I shared those statistics about the Congressional Progressive Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus is that right now, and you were mentioning this earlier, Nick, right now getting money from APAC has become radioactive because
Yeah.
the mass of people are not accepting it. So you do have candidates now saying, I'm not taking money from APAC. But here's the deal. A lot of those people who voted for the genocide money, they are also not taking money from APAC, but they did that anyway. AOC is not taking money from APAC. Even she has cast votes in favor of the genocide by calling Iron Dome a defensive weapon. And that's why it's important for us to remember that, because heading into the midterms, we're going to have candidates like Grant Plattner, Kat Abu Ghazaleh. I mean, we actually tweeted out in solidarity with her and her fellow activists who are being targeted by Trump for their anti-ICE activism. But what we're clarifying is that a lot of these candidates say that they're not taking money from APAC, which is good. That's the first step. However, as long as you're running from the Democratic Party, the writing is on the wall. A lot of people who have not taken money from APAC either outright voted for the genocide, or they didn't vote for it, but they've been silent in the face of it and refusing to call for an end to arms to Israel. So that is where it's at. And I think it's important that we build a powerful campaign to defeat Adam Smith.
I'm still mad that they compared you to Zohran Mamdani. I'm still mad they compare you to Graham Plattner, bro. Get the fuck out of here. Like, no one should ever take the free press serious ever again. Get the fuck out of here.
And also, what about this of following somebody's lead? I mean, we ran in 2013 and we were on the city council for 10 years. We won 4 elections. If anything, they're following our lead, but not quite. I wish they were following our lead, but they're not.
Like, the audacity of these people. I found it right before we went live. I'm like, man, I know Kshama will laugh at this. The audacity of this ridiculous article. And by the way, I have a question for the anti-communists who pretend they're actually socialists. If socialism is so toxic that you have to run away from it, why do you guys call yourself socialists when you're not? Zohran Mamdani is a welfare capitalist. Now, if you like that, if you think that's necessary for your life, that's okay. You're not as far left as us. But he's not a socialist. He supports social welfare programs, social welfare reforms. That is not a socialist. So if you think socialism is politically toxic, why are you jacking the label? Why won't you just call yourself a welfare capitalist? Like, there was the leak jacks with Graham Plattner was like, man, I'm secretly a communist. No, the fuck you're not, bro. Like, you guys would not be organizing within a genocidal party. If you're a communist, you wouldn't be fighting for a genocidal empire. So if the label is as toxic as you guys claim it is, why you guys keep jacking our swag? I hear people say all the time, they're like, Nick, ACP, Haas, why you guys always gatekeeping socialism? My response is, why do you guys keep trying to call yourself socialist if you're not? It's just crazy to me. But Kshama, I think you wanted to chime in. I think this headline was funny. Anything else you want to say before I move on? We get near the end here.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, I'm pretty sure that a lot of the people are calling themselves socialists or joining DSA, and calling themselves democratic social. I mean, any given person, I don't know what's in their brain and how well-intentioned they are. I don't want to get into that discussion because that's not a useful discussion. But what I can say is that the reason they're not dispensing with the socialist label and they are calling themselves socialists is because actually socialism and socialist ideas are increasingly popular among the American working class. Absolutely. If there's anything that's unpopular, it is the C word, that's capitalism. And in fact, we showed this, 11 years ago when we ran 12 years ago when we ran as an open socialist at that time, and there were a lot of Democratic Party operatives telling me, oh, don't run as a socialist, people are not going to like it. But no, they liked it. That is precisely what they liked it. But I want to say that if you are not a revolutionary socialist, you will not be able to win the kind of victories that we won. And so, I want to clarify that they are certainly not revolutionaries. Many of these people calling themselves socialists are not revolutionaries. They are running inside a party of capitalism, as you said. But they are, if you don't have a revolutionary approach, and revolutionary meaning if you don't have at least a militant approach, a clarity that you can't win material gains for the working class by trying to make peace with the bosses who are exploiting the working class, if you don't get that much, then you're not going to be able to win even reforms, so to say. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that it is precisely revolutionaries that make the best and really the only winners of reforms. So if we want to win healthcare, we've got to build the kind of movement that we are talking about. And that is why, for example, on December 6th, we are hosting a town hall on free healthcare for all, funded by taxing the rich. I mean, how many years have AOC and Bernie Sanders and Pramila Jayapal and whoever else talked about Medicare for all and never ever even brought it to a vote in the US Congress? Why? Because they don't want to expose the Democrats who want to vote no, and so they don't want the vote itself. Same with CalCare. 2 times the California Democrats refused to bring it to a vote and completely betrayed the movement. And so if there's any future for actual healthcare, universal healthcare, that breakthrough is only going to come about through the kind of approach we are talking about. And that is another reason why it's so crucial that we fight to win this position in US Congress.
Yeah, for our very last topic, I'm a hard pivot because I want to. We'll wrap up here very soon. I just want to name drop your opponent here, but you have the Senate that was, and I always try to avoid just casting blame on just the president. Everyone loves to do that. Always made it clear that it was Joe Biden and the Democratic Party that was funding Jen. So they love the scapegoats. Like, it's not just Donald Trump waging war against Venezuela. This is Marco Rubio's lifetime project, fam. This is the project of every single Gusano trader, every single anti-communist has been salivating to destroy the legacy of Hugo Chavez by force if necessary. So there was Democrats who forced a measure so the president would have to seek congressional approval in strikes in Venezuela. And every single Republican, I think Rand Paul was like one of the only 2 senators who voted against it. So I want people to understand it's not just Donald Trump's war. This is the war of the United States Senate. This is why I didn't like the No King rally, because you guys know I'm a fucking nitpicky nerd. Like, Donald Trump isn't a king. He's doing the bidding of Lindsey Graham, of Mike Johnson. His legislation is approved of by the capitalist dictatorship. So when liberals say stuff like no kings, it's meant to confuse. It's actually very anti-theory in a lot of ways. It's meant to muddy the waters in class warfare. No kings. Like, look, you guys had people like Nancy Pelosi who damn near died in office. Dianne Feinstein who died in office. You guys talk about no king. No, the problem is capitalism. But here's the Senate who blocked the measure that would have forced Donald Trump to seek congressional approval, which is essentially the Senate approving of the strikes in Venezuela. And to wrap up, I found this interview with Adam Smith. He gave this interview with the Atlantic Council. So you guys know, as someone who is a campaign surrogate of Kshama Sawant, I have my eyes on Adam Smith like a hawk. So he gave this interview. I'm like, oh my God. And it's just as you expect from a neocon Democrat. And I explained to you guys that the criticism that these Democrats have of Donald Trump isn't the military action itself. It's that he's not going through the proper channels, that he's not seeking congressional approval. So in this interview, and I highly suggest you guys check it out, because his interview is just as deranged as you would think from this vampire-looking neocon. Well, he explained that that drug trafficking gangs in the Western Hemisphere is a problem for our national security. Pause. Shut the fuck up. You guys see how Democrats, while critiquing Trump, legitimizes his imperialist actions? He says we have narco states down there. I know it's hard to see for you guys. Actually, I think I can make it bigger. Let me see if I can, so you guys can see it too. He said we got budding narco states down there. They're having a harder and harder time dealing with that. We need to be engaged and involved in that. What? What are you talking about? You guys see how and you guys see in the second next paragraph, he's critical of Donald Trump because he's not going through the right protocols. The position of a lot of the Congress people is like, man, can you give me an opportunity to vote for this war? But what I want you to respond to, because you have that, but you also have the range, the worldview of Adam Smith that is exposed to it. And I want you to comment on this, Kshama. In a time where the American working class is struggling, there are millions of people that are homeless. We have our infrastructure that's falling apart. Adam Smith is still endorsing spending billions of dollars on military presence abroad. So Kshama, pay attention to this. Look, I think one of the mistakes that we have made is to assume that our global presence is just a cause that isn't benefiting us. Adam Smith says a United States deployment abroad. And you know what he wants us to be worried about? And this just shows the neocon ideology that must be defeated. Citing threats posed by Russia, China, and Iran? Fam, is Russia responsible for the crisis in medical debt that the American working class is going through? Is Iran responsible for the fact that 69%, according to a recent poll, show that 69% of Americans are working and living paycheck to paycheck? Is that because of China? So sorry for the rant, but Kshama, I want to hear your thoughts. But you guys see how Adam Smith, to this day, this is an interview that just came out 2 days ago, is justifying United States military presence worldwide and says that we have to stay engaged to counter Russia, China, and Iran. So are these people truly oppositional to Trump? Kshama, sorry for the rant. I would love for you to respond to this.
Oh, no. I love that rant. I love that rant. And, it's really important you brought this up, Nick, because this not only exposes Adam Smith himself, but also shows you once again, that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both parties of war, genocide, bloodshed, and imperialism, and the exploitation of the global working class, both the US and international working class. That is the agenda that they represent. And so, it is completely horrendous that their objection, and I've seen interviews of other Democrats as well in the context of Trump's attacks on these boats in the Caribbean waters, that somehow the problem is not that he is killing presumably innocent people, because there's not been one shred of evidence that these are illicit drug boats or anything like that. And so the objection that the Democrats have is not that presumably innocent people are being slaughtered, but that he didn't seek congressional approval. That is their objection. You know what had congressional approval? The genocide in Gaza. You know what had congressional approval? The Afghanistan invasion. You know what had congressional approval? The Iraq invasion. So the congressional approval is not some sort of seal of morality, but it's exactly the opposite. And it shows you that Trump and the right wing and the Republican Party and the Democratic Party they have cosmetic differences, but as far as the agenda of imperialism and exploiting billions of working class people, they are completely united. And look at what he's saying from the article you shared, Nick. Literally, Adam Smith is saying, I don't think simply committing this large number of assets, hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars by the time it's done, to blow up some drug boats in international waters is going to make an appreciable difference in the fight against drug trafficking. Notice this. So he is on exactly the same page as Trump and the Republicans and Marco Rubio. He's on the same page as all of them, that this is all about stopping drug trafficking. And Yeah, he has a logistical and a fiscal question about it. Like, I don't think that's a good use of money. We need more things to come out of billion. Like, he wants more bloodshed out of those billions of dollars. And look at what he says about the so-called National Defense Authorization Act. I say so-called because it's military and warfare kind of, and it funds a genocide and all that. He says that um, he says that what he's implying is that there's a risk of not moving fast enough with military endeavors. So in other words, this guy,
Oh, what the fuck?
he's not happy with the pace that Trump is carrying out.
Uh,
He says it's too slow. Let's do more. Do more
that's
here.
crazy, fam.
It's completely crazy. And look at the facts. The United States is is, if anything, it is the world's biggest money laundering machine for global drug trafficking. And this is it's like a reincarnation of what probably happened in the 60s and 70s and so on, with the stories that we've heard before of things that happened before us, where the imperialist project against Latin America was in order to crush any kind of working class organizing, any kind of labor militancy in Latin America. That was done in the name of the war on drugs. It was done in the name of trying to defeat all these supposedly nefarious forces. But in reality, what the real agenda was, that if there's any semblance of the left in Latin America, that poses a threat for US imperialism. And so that's what you're seeing. And that is absolutely a bipartisan agenda for both the Democrats and Republicans.
So apparently they have like a 1 hour version of this interview, and there's no way in hell I would ever watch this. But you guys see that we're just getting started. Like, we're gonna be cooking Adam Smith this entire year, Kshama. Because I've been watching this guy like a hawk, and his best campaign strategy would be to pull Kamala Harris. I would say just to pull Joe Biden. Try to stay away from the media, because the more he give interviews, the more unhinged he seems. And I don't know, maybe it's because I've been following him more, but I swear I've been seeing him on corporate media more. I know they see the shadow of your campaign, Kshama. I see them subtly try to prop this guy up. This guy, I've never seen this guy before. All of a sudden, he's on CNN. I've seen him on MSNBC. The Atlantic Council's propping him up. So we got to defeat this unhinged neocon, because this interview he gave, I guess this is the video version. God, who would watch this? Who would watch this hour dribble, neocon dribble? The Atlantic Council. I guess they summed up his points here. I just now realized I had the video there. But man, this interview is horrific. This is the person who Kshama's running against. And it's going to be very telling. I know Kshama got to be diplomatic, but I don't have to be. But it's going to be very telling, all the people who mobilized for Zohran, whether they're going to be on board with defeating this monster. This guy called Americans who protested against Israel fascist. Or are they going to stay on the sidelines? If Zohran doesn't even send out a tweet, what does that say? What does that say if all the Zohran surrogates refuse to support Kshama Sawant, challenging this psychopath simply because she's running as an independent? We'll be watching you guys the same way I'll be watching Adam Smith. But Kshama, I'll give you last thoughts. It's always great to have you on, especially to end it on a Friday. One of my favorite guests. We can discuss theory and this kind of stuff all night, but we can end it here. Any final messages? Any way people can support your campaign? I'll give you final thoughts as we wrap up. Always great doing shows with you, Kshama. Thank you for joining us.
Likewise, Nick, always a pleasure to speak with you. I'm so grateful you're having me on, and I look forward to more conversations, and also building the congressional campaign alongside you. First of all, everybody who's watching this, if you agree with us, then you should join our campaign, because this is a national campaign. It doesn't matter where you live in the United States. If you want a fight back against the forces of imperialism, if you want to fight back to win free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich, if you are angry about the genocide and want to fight to end all US military aid to Israel, then you should join our campaign. Our campaign is also calling for national rent control. We're also calling for a federal $25 an hour minimum wage. And in big cities, we think the wages should be minimum wage should be at least $30 an hour. So this is what we're fighting for. And you can see from our just absolutely unparalleled track record in Seattle that we keep our promises. And the reason we do it is because we're not talking about electing a person for some individual career and a life of comfort. We are talking about using this elected position as a platform, a vehicle to build militant mass movement. And we know we can do this nationally. We've seen the Italian working class and other sections of the working class internationally show that it is possible to build that kind of fight back. But it's not going to happen from this type of militant fight back is not going to come. I mean, it's certainly not going to come from the parties of capitalism, the Democrats and Republicans, but it's also not going to come from the leadership of the labor movement today in America, because they are what I would call business unionist, which is they are tied to making peace with the bosses, which also means making peace with the bosses' agenda, imperialism, bosses' parties. And so that fight back we have to build from the outside, and rank and file union members have to join us. The reason I'm putting a fine point on this is that going into the midterms, we have to remind everyone that a big part of the working class fight back during the midterm elections has to be rank and file union members fighting against the leadership who will do what they do every single year, which is pour millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars into Democratic races. Some of them, like Sean O'Brien of the Teamsters, are even worse than that. You know, they are gone over to the Trump and the Josh Hawley side. And so we have to fight for independent, socialist, working class agendas. And in relation to Adam Smith, what has happened? The labor leadership has spent 3 decades giving no strings attached endorsements and campaign funds to Democrats like Adam Smith.
That's
And in
crazy.
turn, yeah, absolutely. You know, he has received over $500,000 from labor unions since he first went to the US Congress. It is utterly shameful. Last year, as he was
That's
voting
crazy.
for the genocide, the labor leadership was endorsing him. Recently, just in the summer, some of the labor leaders, they held of, can you imagine, they held a food related feast and fundraiser for a guy who voted to ban food assistance from Gaza. I mean, it could not be more poetic. You know, it almost seems like somebody wrote this script for a show on Netflix. That's how poetic it was. You know, here he is, the guy who's voting for a genocide, voting to ban United Nations food assistance to the people. And here you have labor leaders celebrating him, bringing food from various restaurants and saying, hey, come and eat with us. We protested outside that fundraiser. We held Worker Strike Back, and my campaign held a pots and pans fundraiser. A protest. We banged on our pots and pans and said, how grotesque is it that any section of the labor leadership would actually not only support but celebrate a guy who has voted for mass starvation? This is the antithesis of what the union movement needs to stand for, which is international working class solidarity. So let's use this midterm election year to show a real example of international working class solidarity by building this campaign and defeating Adam Smith.
You have my support, Kshama. You guys would be crazy if you wouldn't support this. This will be our movement on the national stage. Can you imagine me giving a speech on the national stage pushing for our agenda? One of the best things about doing events with you guys is just chatting with the comrades at Worker Strike Back, because everyone is based. They always have a somewhat knowledge in theory, and it's great to see like-minded people organize. And imagine us taking that on the national stage, fam. Like people like Mike Johnson who had to contest with our politics. It's possible. Let's get organized and let's get to work. Thank you, Kshama. We definitely will do this again soon. It's always great to be in conversation with you. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great rest of your weekend. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, share, and support me on Patreon. Have a great weekend.